Now I am.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in to the library's newest venture on our social media platform. We're calling this Libraries Recommend, where your Hudson librarians are picking a topic and we're going to give you book recommendations for that particular topic. This month, for September, we are focusing on lighter reads. So each of us is going to present a different book. We're going to tell you who this book is for, what you might like about it, and please leave any comments or questions below, either on Facebook or on our YouTube channel. And also, please give us your feedback as far as what topics you'd like to see from us coming up. So I'm going to start. My name's Madeline. I'm your technical services librarian at the Hudson Library, and I love to read just about anything. But for this topic, lighter reads, I chose a book called The Singles Game by Lauren Weisberger. And probably her most famous or well-known book is called The Devil Wears Prada. That was made into a movie with Meryl Streep and Anne Hathaway. This is definitely more of a chick lit kind of a book, but what I love about it is that it involves a tennis player. It's about your good girl, kind of wholesome professional tennis player who goes through an injury and decides to get a new coach who decides to revamp her whole image, turning her from the wholesome good girl into the warrior princess of tennis. I love sports. I played soccer for 10 years, so I love the Olympics. I like to read anything about sports that puts you behind the scenes from an athlete's perspective. So not only did this book have plenty of juicy love stories, it also has your kind of media makeover, celebrity angle, and then lots to do about tennis. I'm not a tennis player, but I really enjoyed learning about tennis. So I fully recommend this book for anyone who's interested in something very light, easy to read with fun characters. And I think next we will move on to Chris Mick for his light read recommendation.
Thanks, Madeline. Yes, my name is Christopher Mick. I have a hard time doing a light read, as some of you may know, so I think the staff is going to tease me a little bit, but I kind of lean toward some science or some adventure or some historical works. So mine is a new book by John Gertner. It's called The Ice at the End of the World, if I can get that in there properly. So John has written a previous book that I was a big fan of called The Idea Factory, which is about the Bell Labs and the staff that worked there. So when I heard his new book was coming out, I was pretty excited about it. We don't have this particular title at our library, but I looked it up. There's about 4 copies available at some of our shared partner institutions, such as Eau Claire and Luck and whatnot. So it is available. And I wanted to recommend it because I'm currently reading it right now. I was pretty excited about it. So when I heard this was coming up, I thought I would put this in for my recommendation. So it primarily deals with kind of the history of Greenland in the phase of exploration. So it initially goes all the way back to documented stories of the Vikings landing on Greenland. And then the main chunk of the book kind of goes into the history of expeditions, mapping and charting and exploring Greenland. So it starts in the late 1800s with some of the first recorded expeditions to kind of cross Greenland from coast to coast, and works into right after World War II, where the military became interested in trying to establish a military base on Greenland. And some of the people that were doing science and studying the ice and trying to map the thickness of the ice, et cetera, were kind of partnered with the military, because the military became very interested in how you could operate and function in an extreme climate such as Greenland. So it goes all the way through to today with recent missions by NASA kind of exploring Greenland, Operation Icebridge and whatnot. So just kind of a fascinating, it's a history, some of the exploration, why scientists want to study Greenland and why it's such a good kind of laboratory for understanding how climate works, how the Greenland ice sheet affects the climate all around the rest of the world, and then kind of the history of the expeditions there. So if you kind of like some of those stories, like, you know, Shackleton and North Pole or South Pole exploration, things like that, it's got some of those stories. And then, of course, Meeting Me, it's got some science in there as well. But I thought it's a really great read. I'm almost done with it. I got about 2 chapters to go, and that was my pick for our first presentation today. And I'm not sure who's next. I don't know who to hand off to.
I'll go. All right,
Oh, Joan.
I'm Joan. The book I would like to recommend is called Good Riddance by Eleanor Lippman. Full disclosure, I am not a light reader in general. I like mystery. I also read literary fiction. I had to get a recommendation for a light read from another coworker who is not on this session here. And my criteria was I want something that's not serious, because everything in the world seems so serious right now, but it has to be well written. And she said that she always reads Eleanor Lippman. So Eleanor has a lot of books out, and I'm not sure if I've read one of hers earlier. That's not a reflection on the quality of her work. It's a reflection on my memory. So anyways, this book was good escape for me because it takes place in New York City. It has nothing totally pre-pandemic, nothing about that. And the people who live in New York City reflect the charming parts of New York City. The characters in this book, there's dog walkers and there's actors, and it's all sort of just the fun idea of living in New York. Food, which is always great to read about. The main character is a young woman who, in a decluttering mode, who hasn't done that, recycles a yearbook that was willed to her by her mother. And she holds the yearbook close to her heart and asks herself if it's something she loves. And she doesn't, so she gets rid of it. And this yearbook is then found by a neighbor who wants to use it for some creative outlet. So sort of a story within a story. Who doesn't want to do something fun about a yearbook? The mother was the yearbook advisor, and so the yearbook was dedicated to her, and she went to all of the reunions of this high school class. She was a teacher and yearbook advisor, went to all of the reunions of this high school class and took notes about different people. So the story goes on from there. All of the characters are pretty charming. The main character is witty and sort of a little snarky, so nobody's too cute. There's a little romance, but it's not serious. I would say the whole thing is the book doesn't take itself too seriously and just presents a kind of plot-driven story. You know, what's going to happen in this situation with charming characters in a pretty charming setting. So I found it delightful.
Awesome.
Let's go to Sarah.
Okay. Well, I've never done anything like this before, but my light read that I picked was Max's Story, A Dog's Purpose Puppy Tale by W. Bruce Cameron. And it's a book for younger readers, but I read it to my daughters this summer, and I really enjoyed it myself. W. Bruce Cameron has written A Dog's Purpose, A Dog's Journey, and The Dogs of Christmas. So obviously a dog person. And what I really liked about this book is that it's written from the dog's perspective. And so many times since I've read this book, I've sat there and I thought, I wonder if my dog feels this way. And it's just so funny to think of things that we say common times to our dogs, what would be going through their brain. So I really enjoyed that look at it, and it just brought light to things that I do every single day with my dog. So it was about a dog that obviously is a little dog, and in a big city, and they're trying to find a home for him, but he's kind of snippy, and and he's got to be boss. And so they show how he finds his home and how he teaches others while learning how to not be quite as snippy. I really like how he says they're playing a game, and she gives him a treat and says, "Good boy." And so it's it's a game to him, but that's how she's teaching him to be nice to other dogs and other people. So I really enjoyed just the whole perspective coming from a dog, because I don't typically think that way.
Awesome. All right, well, I guess I'll go next because I don't want to be last. I have a special interest in middle grade category. So I picked a middle grade novel, The Girl Who Drank the Moon. And I think this is a perfect family read aloud book for kids who love magic and fantasy. It's by Kelly Barnhill, who also wrote a wonderful novel called The Witch's Boy. This won the Newbery 3 years ago. And it's kind of cool, since she's a Twin Cities writer, that we have 3 Newbery books from the Twin Cities in, I don't know, maybe a 10-year period, 12-year period, with Kate DiCamillo being the other author and having 2 wins. So this is a very well-reviewed book, and sometimes really well-reviewed books with lots of awards aren't particularly cherished by kids. They feel like the book adults want them to read instead of the books they want to read. And I think they will feel differently about this one. It's a story about a village, and the people in the village believe there is an evil witch in the woods. And so every year they put one of their newborn babies out as a sacrifice to keep the witch from harming them. Well, the witch is actually a wonderful person and a very loving witch, and she has no idea why these crazy villagers are putting a baby out once a year. So she takes them and goes on a journey across the forest to another community and finds them an adoptive home. And along the way, she has to nourish them with starlight. That's what keeps them safe and fed. So she gets a baby one year and accidentally feeds the baby moonlight, which enmagics her. And she can no longer now leave this baby with the people on the other side of the forest, because she has created another witch in a sense. So she has to raise the baby herself. And as the girl, Luna, grows up, she starts to develop some pretty unusual and strong magic powers. And as the situation evolves, the stakes get really high, and we're introduced to a villain and also a human villain. So a magic villain and a human villain. And it's a really exciting story. It's very well written and lyrical without being over the top in a literary style. And sometimes fantasy and magic books can be difficult for sensitive kids because you know, magic is so unknown and it feels so powerful, and the villains can seem terrifying, actually. And this book, I don't think will do that to those sensitive readers. I think it has enough scary things happening under darkness or behind sort of a fictional curtain that they would not feel threatened. And there is a death in the book, but it's handled very well. It's an older person, and the person dies from happiness. So I think that this is going to be a book most kids will love. And I think it would be ideal for families to read together because it speaks a lot to what family is and how you can build family even if you're not related. So The Girl Who Drank the Moon, and we do have copies of it here and many in the system since it was such a big book and a regional author. So Joseph, you're it.
Right. So I am also one of those librarians who doesn't do a lot of light reading, but after staring at my bookshelf for a couple of minutes, I realized there was only one book that I could actually recommend. That would be William Goldman's The Princess Bride. I don't know if that's coming through. I assume many of the people watching this video are probably familiar with the film adaptation. It's kind of one of those that everyone has seen like a dozen times or so. If you're not, though, a very quick overview is that it's essentially a very light, classic take on like the fairy tale archetype. There's the farm boy chasing after his beloved who has been forcefully betrothed to the vile prince, There's all sorts of wonderful adventures and characters on the way. This is basically the literary equivalent of like a weighted blanket. Like, I defy anyone to read this book and not just feel better while they're doing so. Even if you are one of those people who have read, or excuse me, seen the movie however many times, I still heartily recommend reading the book. It is different enough in all the right ways that even if you're familiar with it, it still feels fresh. It's so fun. It's so quotable. I heard one person say that every one of this book's 200 odd pages has at least one quotable line, and I feel hard pressed to deny that. It's just endlessly fun, endlessly enjoyable, and pleasant and easy to read and get into. It's an absolute joy, and I can't recommend it enough to basically anyone. So I think it's the perfect light read for just about all ages and all tastes. But I might be biased because I am one of those people who has seen the movie probably 2 or 3 dozen times. So William Goldman's The Princess Bride, 2 thumbs up.
Maybe we should all hold up our books here at the end in case people forget the titles.
All right, we can just get a nice screen grab of all of them, then they can skip to this part and
Exactly.
yeah.
Well, thank you so much. I think that was a really good variety. And again, if there's any library patrons out there who have a request for our next topic, please feel free to leave that in the comments and let us know what you're reading. Let us know what your light read recommendations are as well.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.